Welcome to Things You Don't Know. Well, we made it through another year, and we're looking forward to a great new year of adventure and learning. We have covered a super wide range of things from popcorn and toilet paper to more serious topics. I've been so very pleased actually over the preceding year with the support we've gotten from our audience. And I thank you all very much. If you hear in the background the cat, she wants to participate too.
It's been a fun and very interesting journey, friends, filled with more work than people might realize, because we always strive to properly research our topics. The great part about this experience is that we are constantly learning new things, which is something I love. You told me once, Dr. Weaver, that Piaget told you, if you think you can't learn from a child, you have taken a large step towards stupidity. I think that applies to every topic we presented. I can remember some times in the beginning when you suggested a topic, and I thought no one would be interested in that, or that I knew all about the topic already. I don't go there anymore because it is never proven to be even close to the truth. Popcorn, for example, tells us a great deal about Native and South American culture and indigenous spirituality. We detailed the contribution of Ms. Viola Desmond, the Rosa Parks of Canada, to mention only two of our many wonderful topics.
Yeah, I must admit, there have been topics that you have suggested, Dr. Deneen, that I thought would be a real boring thing for me. But you always made them come alive and made them filled with intrigue. So I don't think that ridiculous thought anymore. You know, one of the things that has surprised me over the past few years of working on this podcast is when people suggest that you somehow forced me to do this podcast with you.
Good heavens.
That is taking stupidity to a whole new level. Trust me. I remember when I brought the idea of doing the podcast up to you. Yeah. It was my idea, folks. I think in the beginning, you were concerned that we would either be doing it like teaching a class or just doing yak, like so many podcasts feature. It took a little bit of convincing to get you to accept the new style that we have adopted. I have made my mistakes along the way, but I thank you for always being there to rescue things. I love the fact that we share information and teach each other consistently, constantly, and I thank you.
Thank you too, my friend. I assure you, I feel the same mutual respect. What we've really been able to do is take some very abstract topics where once thought only fit for long forgotten dusty books, and we brought them out to an audience of people of all ages and backgrounds who have not spent hours wading knee deep in the stacks of a library the way I did. One of my habits, I'll admit it quite openly, is I have a tendency to dive into bits of trivia. It fascinates me. Why did Burger Chef stop serving the Mariner fish sandwich in Canada in 1978? Or how did the Russian Imperial Army change its system of medals and decorations prior to the First World War? One thing you've been really wonderful about is you've helped me take what could be mere recitation or my pet interests and help me make it practical and interesting.
Something that has always puzzled me is why people could ever think that you could force me into doing anything I don't want to do, especially at this point in my life. I've done a lot of things, and I don't have to do other things. I don't have to do the podcast. I want to. I started it. It was my idea. And besides the which, I know you wouldn't even try to do such a silly thing.
Not for 5 minutes. I think because of the way you present yourself, people see you as a leader, as unique. You have what my Zulu friends called Izawapika, which means the strength of a lion. I have a great deal of admiration and respect for your commitment to rigor, organization, and dedication.
No, we bring very different backgrounds and expertise to bear. My background is psychology, music, and some English skills. You, you bring a profound knowledge of history, a precious and unusual perspective, partially from battling to be seen as a superior intellect rather than playing the pity card of a person with a disability. You also bring a depth of kindness rarely seen, and that's true. And you also have the ability to keep me from charging off into esoteric, scientific, or technical music theory or other kinds of things, too. Today and together, we are far better than I can be by myself, I'm sure.
I agree entirely that we make a great team. We're strong together. I say without any equivocation, we've accomplished and will accomplish great things. Looking back on the 67 podcasts we've done so far, I'm intrigued at all the multivariate things we have and will explore.
Okay, so what is in process for 2024? As we have mentioned, we are starting a new podcast in addition to continuing with this podcast. The new podcast is called History Twists, which is an alternate history podcast in which we will explore what might have been with a few changes. You know, there are a lot of those podcasts out there, but they tend to focus on just a few topics, sensational topics, whatever, things that people know about. Well, this is called Things You Don't Know. So guess what? History Twists is kind of a takeoff from that. So, you know, we're rule breakers. We're going to do what we want to do with it. Yeah. So don't look for what if Germany won World War II or what if the South won the Civil War or that kind of thing. It's been done so much. We don't need to do it again.
Those are two interesting topics, and some of my mentors in alternative history have explored that brilliantly. But you're right, there is a market and a need for other things. So, our first history twist is going to involve the idea of Norse settlers traveling further south and joining forces with the Virginia Algonquin Native Americans. The next will be a two-part podcast. In the first part, I'm going to be interviewing you, Dr. Weaver, about this fascinating novel you've written concerning a different path for Native Americans. This novel has a number of science fiction aspects, including space exploration, as well as exploring Native American heritage and culture, both in our timeline and the timeline you've created. The second part will focus on social and cultural differences and possibilities in the new timeline. Another interesting topic that I thought of just for fun, because of my Irish heritage, to explore in History Twists, would focus on the impact of the Irish rebellions against Britain during and preceding the First World War, how a victory of the Irish with German help might have changed history.
What does that mean?
Well, had the Irish managed to gain their independence with the help of the Second Reich, Europe and the world would be a very different place.
Okay. So we're going to get into a little bit of Irish culture as well as history with that, I'm sure, right?
Indeed.
Okay. So we've got some other surprises in History Twists, exploring some unusual takes on how different things might have been if people with differences had become accepted and part of the mainstream. How about looking way, way back to human roots and seeing the value brought to humanity by differences? Because including, as I've said before, including different perspectives and viewpoints always makes for better informed decisions. Not always the best decisions, perhaps, but usually much better than the alternatives, because you can't make a sum without the numbers in place first. And that means a variety of numbers. In this case, we're talking differences. And, having those differences and those different perspectives be represented is critically important.
You're absolutely correct, and we're going to do that in many areas. This new year of 2024 will see us present our original research concerning the LGBTQIA community. Speaking about inclusion, we've come up with some really big plans for bringing more people, especially students, into participation in developing and being involved in the podcasts. This should really be great. I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to that. We're also considering exploring the history of addictions, substance abuse. We want to look at medical data and possibly even including genetic factors.
Indeed. The history of humanity really is involved in many ways with addictions and substance abuse. And it has been around for a long time, sometimes quite codified and promoted by governments. I'm thinking of the opium that was imported from China and used by Americans. I'm sure that slowed progress in many ways. But there's other things too. There's something else that goes on here, and we're going to look at that. Why do people get hooked? What's the deal? Why do they get started in that anyhow? And then moving on here, just to be fair, Dr. Deneen is going to interview me. Well, I'm going to interview Dr. Deneen about his book concerning Vietnam and why the war didn't end sooner. I mean, he gets to interview me about my novel, so I get to put him on the spot. Yeah, you'll want to tune in for that one, as there is so much important information to be gathered. It really is a fascinating topic, especially the way he presents it and looks at it from several different perspectives. I mean, there were a lot of attempts to do something from a lot of unsuspected or unknown people, unknown countries you wouldn't expect would be at all interested in ending the war in Vietnam. Talking about, for example, Russia. I'm talking about the Shah of Iran. I'm talking about so many others. He's got them all. He's got them all down there. It may actually turn into a two-parter depending on how long it goes.
I thank you for doing this. It's only fair. And as the son of a veteran, I've always been fascinated and somewhat disappointed at the way the men and women who fought that war really suffered. So it did not have to turn out and take as long as it had. So I'm looking forward to going into that a little further. But one thing that's always surprised me, we've talked about this privately before, you've been able and were able as an undergraduate to do an amazing amount of both academic and social activities. And you've consistently said you develop skills to make it not hard. And you finally agreed to give the world the secret of just how you were able to do that. I've heard you talk about it, but I almost thought it involved magic.
No, Merlin, I am not. I really am, though, excited about that podcast. And I'm hoping that you will let me bring in some students and make a multi part podcast, as I know that with a few tweaks, students can go a long way toward reaching their potential. I'm talking about spending less time studying, but studying better. You know, my freshman year as an undergraduate, I really had to choose between flunking out, which I just nearly did, and learning how to learn. I want to make that information available to other people. I don't want them to go through that. That was not pleasant. You know, I was very, very fortunate. I had the amazing help of uh, two professors, Dr. Mary Cox and Dr. Ludwig Sikorsky, who have since passed on. But I need to pass that on to others. It's kind of important to me.
I agree with you, and I think it would be a great tribute to those two great scholars. I know I can't think of anything better than to open the door in our project to as many people, scholars and ordinary human beings alike, as possible. I too was blessed and have been blessed by many wonderful students, but throughout my educational experience with men and women who, even against the orthodoxy of the educational world in that time, saw and nurtured my talents. I want to give a special thanks to one from my distant past. I was blessed over the holiday season to have my 50th birthday and to reconnect with one of my first mentors. I hadn't spoken to her in many years. Miss Jackie Hansen, who was a great teacher in my elementary school days, who moved heaven and earth to unlock my abilities and develop my confidence. When I was beginning schooling my friends, any disability except blindness was automatically assumed to include an intellectual component, and you were in many ways written off. And Miss Hansen gave all of her students a tremendous amount of intellectual and emotional support. She helped me to develop the idea of intellectual play, of finding joy in learning, and that laid the foundation of my success in every aspect of my life. I want to tell you, not many first grade teachers explore the branches of government with their class or read Shakespeare. I will never forget, this is a somewhat funny story. One student, toward the end of that year in 1979, had driven her absolutely bonkers one Friday afternoon and just went on and on and on, causing all sorts of excitement and trouble, and finally stood up in the classroom and would not sit down. And she was very patient. It went on, but she'd finally had enough. So at the end of her rope, when this student refused to sit down after more than an hour, she channeled her inner Caliban and quoted Tempest, Caliban's famous phrase, "You taught me language, and my profit is I know how to curse." I like to think the bard, had he heard this use of one of his best works, would have been very wryly amused in that typical British way. But I want you all, my friends, to come along with us this year, this great intellectual journey. And as we say at the end of every podcast, we encourage your likes, your comments. Any of you have suggestions or ideas, please share them with us. We derive great joy and great intellectual exercise from doing these podcasts, and we are thrilled to have the opportunity to share it.
Yes, and I wanted to add that there may be people who may be curious about what a podcast entails, what to do, what etc. And we welcome people who say, "Hey, I think I'd like to get in on that. I have something to say about that. Um, somebody might be interested in this, or what have you." Just give us a shout out. Let us know, and if there's a way for us to include you and encourage your participation, we'll do it. we're interested in doing that. So, indeed, this has been a brief little look, but we wanted to do that as we do every new year. And again, as Dr. Deneen said, please give us a like, subscribe, but more importantly, come back and join us. We got some good stuff going. So long for now.
Bye, folks.